I'm going to call this meeting to order. Roll call.
Here.
Myers. Here. Rojas.
Here.
Vogel.
Here.
Pinder.
Here. Pledge of allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Nope.
All right. We're going to start with public comment. Alicia.
To whom it may concern, please be advised that we represent Meadville Landlords United LLC in relation to their concerns over the rental licensing and inspection ordinance 3805 of 2022 and the anti-retaliation ordinance not yet enacted. Though our client understands the city of Meadville is attempting to take steps to ensure tenants within the city limits are provided with stable housing conditions, we fear the newly passed and prospective ordinances go too far in that objective. As such, it is our client's intention to challenge the rental licensing and inspection ordinance, which was passed on December 28, 2022. However, the main reason for this correspondence is to advise against passing and enacting the prospective ordinance referred to as the anti-retaliation ordinance. Since our client has recently made us aware of this prospective ordinance, in addition to ordinance number 3805 of 2022, we find the steps taken to expeditiously enact the ordinance along with some of the language therein to be troublesome. To begin, we have ample reason to believe this ordinance was listed on your recent agenda as a discussion. It was not made available to the general public to inspect, yet the agenda was amended to include both the first and second readings of the ordinance. Next, you state that most landlords respect the right of their tenants to live in dignity and will make a good faith effort to provide predictable lease terms and to address problems that tenants bring to their attention. Yet you base your ordinance affecting all area landlords on the subjective reasoning that some of your citizens have been threatened with or subject to retaliation by their landlord for engaging in lawful activities in pursuit of fair and dignified housing situations. Conveniently, however, the ambiguous terms of fair and dignified go undefined in the following section, allowing anyone in a position of power to subjectively interpret those terms as they see fit, most certainly to the detriment of our client and others similarly situated. Further, you attempt to enact an ordinance that would temporarily prohibit a landlord from entering their own property under the guise of tenant organizers hosting meetings. Finally, and most alarmingly, you attempt to enact an ordinance that would shift the burden of proof from the tenant to landlord whenever a retaliation claim is brought by a tenant. This lies in stark contrast to generally accepted principles of civil litigation in which a plaintiff bears the burden of proof of the claims they are making and a defendant bears the burden of proving an affirmative defense. Thus, under this ordinance, our client and others similarly situated would not only have to prove their claims as a plaintiff in an eviction or other matter, but also prove an affirmative defense to a possible baseless claim of retaliation made by a defendant/tenant. To that end, something so commonplace as raising rent would have to be proved as non-retaliatory if the tenant requests the landlord to refrain from increasing rent or fees within 1 year of the request. On the basis of the information we have reviewed, we have provided Meadville Landlords United LLC with our opinion that they have a basis to challenge this prospective anti-retaliation ordinance. Before taking any further steps to enact this ordinance, we would not only ask but insist you cease and desist from any further action until a time when an ordinance protecting the rights of both tenants and landlords can be enacted. Hopefully you will refrain from proceeding with this ordinance until further discussions can be had, but should you choose otherwise, our client is prepared to move forward to permanently stop and enjoin such an ordinance and to seek compensation for the discrimination such an ordinance deploys against them. Very truly yours, Dornish Law Office.
Thank you, Alicia. Monica?
I'm here tonight to address you on behalf of the landlords in Meadville. The ordinance regarding inspections and the pending ordinance pertaining to retaliation are clearly in the evolution stage without specific implementation or procedural steps having been outlined. In anticipation of these ordinances being implemented, landlords need to prepare themselves and their attorneys for the realities they will be facing. With respect to the retaliation ordinance, we would like to know who will be the hearing authority, aka the judge? Where will the complaint be filed, aka which court? Will all tenants be advised by the city as to what their filing costs will be when they make a complaint? Have you determined what forms will be used upon which they file a complaint? Normally, a non-traffic citation is used when a code enforcement officer alleges a violation of an ordinance. Since a non-traffic citation can only be used by a law enforcement officer, this means code enforcement officers will be filing retaliation complaints on behalf of tenants. And they will be obligated to attend hearings where a new complaint form must be designed. Have you spoken with Judge Pendolino and asked for his insight on this ordinance? Specifically, in court, which would prevail? A legally binding contract between two parties or an ordinance developed by the city? What do you propose a tenant indicate as the specific nature of their complaint? A vague indication just stating retaliation will not permit a landlord to present a defense in court. How can the tenant verify through their signature on the complaint that the facts set forth in the complaint are true and correct when they do not have to state facts? If a tenant files a retaliation complaint against the landlord and the landlord appears at the hearing and the tenant doesn't, or the tenant's claim is unfounded, can the landlord then file a retaliation claim against the tenant for wasting their time, their attorney's time, the court's time, and the expenses and inconvenience which they incurred? If there is no provision for the landlord filing a retaliation claim in this instance, the landlord's only option would be to file a harassment claim against the tenant. If a retaliation claim is deemed to be valid, what penalty is the hearing authority to impose? This ordinance does not list any penalties whatsoever. Even though council is confident they have limited liability when enacting this ordinance, since they would not be directly involved in the actual filing process, they have still provided a structure which lacks a legal foundation, as well as compliance with the well-established principle upon which our legal system in this country is based, that being, a person is presumed innocent until proven guilty. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica. Bob?
I'm here to address the rental registration program and the anti-retaliation ordinance. And I'm going to repeat a few of the things she said because I want everybody to hear it twice to make sure they understand what's going on. Why did you have both readings of the anti-ordinance when you did not have it on the agenda? It seems like you informed your spouses, friends, and groups you are involved with, but not the public. Why? Like the Tribune said, the spirit and transparency of the community engagement that the council members have trotted as a priority was violated. In other words, you didn't let anybody know. Is the anti-retaliation ordinance, section 6B, going to replace section 9A of the retaliation ordinance program? Because they both basically say the same thing. Is one going to counteract the other? Are you going to have both of them on the books, and who's going to go by what statute? They have different times for changing material terms of a lease. Which one will be used? Section A or the other one? Will the anti-retaliation ordinance be a standalone ordinance on its own? Or are you going to revise the inspection program ordinance? Who will be the hearing authority judge? And who will be the code officer judge? That will enforce the ordinance. Will there be a different stage of violations? 1 to 10, being 10 the most serious, 1 being the least? Who will be on the appeals board for the anti-retaliation ordinance? Will it be a code appeals board or a new appeals board? We don't know. You haven't told anybody. You have no structure to your ordinance at all. If someone files a complaint, what form will they use? Like they said, a non-traffic citation like a code enforcement? These can only be used by law enforcement officers. This means code enforcement officers will be filing a retaliation complaint on behalf of the tenant. And they will be obligated to attend the hearing, which is going to cost them money. Is this going to be a public defendant, a public defender? Who's going to represent them? 40 to 50% of the people do not show for civil court hearings. If a judgment is given to the landlord, the only way a landlord can recoup his costs is to file a harassment charge against the tenant and the city. Who will be responsible? The city, the taxpayer, the tenant. In other words, are we going to sue the person that brought the claim, or are we going to sue the council? If a tenant has filed a complaint, shouldn't the landlord be given a chance to defend himself? And who is going to pay for the fees for the filing? The way this is written, the landlord is considered guilty and has to prove his innocence. Normally in America, you're presumed innocent until guilty. Not here. It's just the opposite. There's nothing in the ordinance about landlord rights. In other words, you said nothing in these ordinances about the landlords. It's all about the other people. Landlords should be able to file a complaint against the tenants if tenants are not upholding their part of the agreements. In other words, their lease. We should be able to file a complaint because, such as replacing batteries, removing smoke detectors, not mowing yards, snow removal, trash removal, and illegal vehicles in the yard. That should be the responsibility of the tenant. They should have some skin in this game. It shouldn't be all on the landlords. I think you should take and have a Landlord Fair Act ordinance which represents the landlords, just like you did the retaliation, which would require tenants to be responsible for holding up their part of the agreement between the landlords and the... Now, I've saved you some time. Since you didn't give anybody any paperwork on what you're going to file for anything, I have the Commonwealth Court docket right here, which is going to have to be used when you file a judgment against us in the magistrate's office. I'm quite sure a lot of people have been on the receiving end of these. Okay, there's right here, you filed the amount you have to put in, what it costs. You have not told anybody what it's going to cost the people to file a lawsuit. Now, when this is found for the landlord's favor, who's going to pay the bill? That's where the lawsuits are going to start to come in. Unfortunately, you have made no provisions anywhere that we can see that have anything.
Thank you, Bob. That was the 5 minutes. That's the timer. Thank you. Benjamin?
Evening, Council. I'm Benjamin Varga, 547 Chestnut. I just wanted to come up and show a voice of support for this ordinance, and as someone that lives in, well, not so great housing, seeing protection for the tenants is a really good thing when you're faced with, bad conditions, dilapidated housing. There needs to be protections in place. Other than that, thank you very much.
Thanks, Benjamin. Joe Tompkins?
So I'm here to just voice support for the anti-retaliation ordinance and to thank you for expediting this based on what you heard last time. You might recall, and the people in the audience might recall, that there were a number of renters who spoke during a public comment session at the last council meeting, talking about the conditions that they're facing in their rental housing, the threats they've received from landlords, and asking you as a council to respond in an effective, efficient, and expedited way to give them some help and some protection. So I want to thank you for that. I guess I'd also like to address really quickly some of the mistaken ideas about what this ordinance actually is and does. So essentially, what it would do, it would provide renters protection in the event of an eviction hearing. So it doesn't kick in unless there's an eviction hearing, in which case a renter could bring this ordinance to the magistrate, the MDJ, and say, hey, I think that my landlord is retaliating against me for one of the reasons that's protected in the ordinance. And then it's decided by the magistrate at court. But it doesn't kick in unless it's at an eviction hearing. So again, it's basically a defense that renters can use in the case of an eviction. And the things that are protected under the ordinance are things like working with other tenants to get better housing conditions or fair rent. Speaking at city council, there have been a number of renters who have come here before you in previous meetings who have spoken about their housing conditions and have faced retaliation. Some of them have actually been evicted from their homes. I know that you know about those stories privately. Also speaking to the media, that's something that would be protected. You can see the list, and I thank you again for putting it on the city website. The ordinance is publicly available. It was made available soon after the last meeting. Anybody can go. They can see the 9 different items that are protected. But those are all legally protected rights, right? They're all rights that people already have. And so essentially, you're just backing them up. You're giving them some help, something that they can use in court. Frankly, I'm kind of astonished by the landlord pushback, because if landlords aren't retaliating, if this isn't an issue, why are you fighting it? If you're not already retaliating, what's the big problem? It's not going to affect you at all. And so you only have to be concerned if you're actually retaliating against renters.
Council's up there.
Council's there.
Well, I'm addressing you as well.
Council's up there
Okay.
at the meeting.
Hold on. Can we address him?
It's 5 minutes, he's got his 5 minutes.
I mean, that's really all I have to say. I just want to, again, thank you for moving it along, and I think a lot of people in the audience here, with the exception of the landlords, are very supportive of what you're doing. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Joe. Dan?
All right, mine's going to be short. I don't need 5 minutes again. I appreciate how proactive this council is, or at least the majority of this council is. It's pretty straightforward. There's no laws broken when they made the decision that they could bring this up for the first and second vote 2 weeks ago, and now it's on the agenda for the final vote. People have spoken numerous times about how this is needed, and I look forward to you all passing the anti-retaliation ordinance today. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Lindsay?
Hi, my name is Lindsay Melring. My friends call me Blue. I wanted to bring today my first code enforcement paperwork because I guess nobody believes that's real. So my first one, it had said, first of all, so what happened was we had some problems at the house. One of our ceilings was falling in, and I asked a couple times if our landlord could come fix it, and I sent pictures to him, and he just wasn't coming back. And the other things were, like our windows weren't really you know, they weren't fixed, and we were having a lot of draft problems. Our door in the back wasn't fixed, having a lot of draft problems. And the house was just consistently breaking down. And we were under the impression it was in a lot better shape when we moved in, because I'd come from the houses on Terrace Street where one had burnt down, and I was really, you know, coming from being a property manager of those houses, I was really trying to find a house that was really reliable after that had happened. So I was really astonished that, you know, when we moved into this house, it was falling apart immediately. So what they had said when I asked the code enforcement to come, what the fire department said was, first of all, they said the kitchen ceiling light wasn't working. What had happened was the string had popped off, which I guess I could have fixed myself. The first floor, the kids' bedroom cube was actually what happened was, I guess the light socket wasn't the correct light socket, which is not something I would know. I don't own things. But the fire department seemed to know that that wasn't a correct light socket. It was dangerous. 2 open junction boxes in the basement that didn't have covers on them. Those still aren't fixed, but they didn't cite that again in the second. We did have a second code enforcement come last week, which was good. I haven't got the paperwork for that yet, but I'll go over that in a second. So then we had a couple holes in the drywall, which my landlord did come fix, and that was great. And he did patch the ceiling that was falling down, but it's starting to fall down again because it's consistently moist, because it's always leaking from the roof. The roof is constantly leaking because it's a super old roof. It's shale and it's old and it's falling apart. And I think the fire department's citing that as well, but I'm not really sure what he's doing. I haven't got the paperwork, like I said. The interior of the structure was generally unsanitary, which was my fault, but I took care of that. So in the next code enforcement, there was a big tank that I had of hermit crabs, because I have a lot of hermit crabs. And I downsized them. They are in a little 55-gallon tank now. I took care of that room. It's cleaned up. That was the big issue, I think, on that. Otherwise, house is super sanitary conditions now. And there was an extra refrigerator in the house because Penelec said that the refrigerator was broken. They got us a new one because of weatherization program, awesome. But they didn't remove the refrigerator until a couple weeks ago too, so that was in there for over a year. Every window needed to okay, so it says every window needs to work and close properly to be weather tight. That also counts for all windows need to close properly, just in case of like people breaking in. So we had one room where all of the windows, none of them closed properly. Like you can open all of them. So that's a safety concern at that point. Rotted window frames. And gutters need to be installed. So the gutters need to be installed. That's a huge deal because we had a big icicle almost hit our mailman, and he got really pissed and he quit. And then another case, a big icicle hit our neighbor's truck, and he got super pissed at us, said that we need to fix it. Well, our Liberty Mutual renter's insurance didn't cover that because it wasn't itemized. So then, like, they ended up building a garage because of it, and like now we were like a little bit enemies, and then like I had to go apologize to them, and it was like this issue. Now we're not enemies, we're cool now, but it was like an issue, right? Because our icicle banged his truck up. So, but the gutter, yeah, so the reason for the gutters is because of the icicles. Because it's really, if you've been to my house, it's like really close to the sidewalk. But that's just the first page. But code enforcement came back last week. It was great. They looked over everything. They cited the gutters again. They cited the broken windows again. They looked over the stuff we needed. My landlord has come back. He started to make repairs. I'm really happy about that. I wish that we could have a good communicable relationship, but sometimes I get yelled at, and I get told that I'm not a professional because they're realtors and I'm just a property manager. So that kind of thing kind of shifts, and so I get uncomfortable talking with them because I get yelled at and dehumanized. So, but that's what's going on. So
Thank you, Lindsay. Sina? Sorry.
Hi. Well, I am here to support the anti-retaliation ordinance and also here, I guess, to defend the ordinance that was passed for the rental inspections, because the whole reason the citizens came to council didn't do this, we came to you, is because landlords were not taking care of things that they legally are supposed to take care of as landlords. Like, that's why this started. And then, once we came to you and you said, okay, we're gonna hold landlords accountable, this is their responsibility and they're not taking care of it. So yes, you're gonna listen to the people, you're gonna hold them accountable. Some people were retaliated against. And again, this is from the people. This is people from Meadville saying, we're being retaliated against for trying to hold landlords accountable to what is their responsibility as landlords. One of the things that stood out to me when I was just sitting here listening was, I heard Landlords LLC mentioned, I heard lawyers mentioned. I want to point out the fact there is a clear power differential here. Landlords have all the power and tenants have very little, but we do have protected rights and so do they. No one is proposing that they lose their power to evict. We're simply holding them accountable that when you take away somebody's place to live, when you exercise that power, you are doing it ethically and responsibly. You're not just doing it out of retaliation or on a whim or because someone spoke up and held you accountable for things that you're already supposed to be doing. That is all we're doing here. No one is taking anything away from landlords. We're simply holding them accountable for the power that they hold. If you have the power, you also have the responsibility. That's all I gotta say.
Thank you, Steve. Michelle?
I want to start by thanking the City Council for letting us have an opportunity to speak. My name is Michelle Levito, and I am a professional, and I'll try to keep this professional for you as well. What I'd like to start by saying is, on our leases, on the very last page of our lease, the tenant is signing that they've read the lease, and they are in understanding of the complete lease that was signed. Let's see, where did I put the lease? I have one with me. I can read that for you, if you like.
Michelle.
Oh, I dropped it. Thank you. It states that by signing this lease, each tenant and grantor has read the entire agreement and understands all of it. Each tenant and grantor receives a copy of this lease. We encourage all of our tenants to keep a copy of their lease because it comes into play in things like today. First, in section 3, it talks about landlord and tenant's duties at the start of the lease. At the start of the lease, the tenant agrees that the tenant has personally inspected the property that they are going to call their home. Within 5 days, according to the lease they signed, read, and understood, they have 5 days to provide a list of things that aren't right in that property so the landlord could make them right for that home. We want people to be safe in their home. Paragraph 4 says, damage to the renting unit. We have tenants who have lived there 4 or 5 years, 2 years. Things happen. If you look at your house, you have issues. You call someone to fix it or you fix it yourself. So in our lease, it states the tenant agrees to tell the landlord in writing if there's any conditions in the rental unit that could damage the rental unit or harm them. I will say there are people that have never wrote to us and said, hey, there's damage in my unit. They don't tell us. It needs to be in writing. We're not mind readers. We don't know if something's broken. Then on section 14 of this lease, it talks about smoke detectors. The tenant agreed that they've read this and they understood the smoke detectors. And I'll read it. It says, tenant must inspect and test the operation of all smoke alarms and carbon monoxide detectors in the rental unit at least once per year during the lease and must replace and install batteries to keep the smoke alarms and carbon monoxide detectors always working. So if there is a fire and the fire department comes in and says, where's your smoke detectors? That's not the landlord's responsibility. It is in this lease. Now, mind you, this lease is nothing I typed up. This is from the state of Pennsylvania. We belong to the Pennsylvania Apartment Association out of Erie. They have spent time and time with lawyers and attorneys through the state to provide people, landlords, with these leases that are binding contracts. They're nothing that I came up with. I'm trying to do my part by being a good landlord. On paragraph 26, it talks about repairs, which we've highlighted a little bit already, but it says repairs. The tenant immediately will tell the landlord in writing, again, it says in writing, of any such repairs that are needed. The landlord does not have to make any repairs to the plumbing, electrical fixtures which break or need repairs caused by the tenant. So if the toilet's clogged, they need to use the plunger. Tenant's family, guest, or others that break it, they need to fix it. The tenant cannot reduce the monthly rent because of any inconvenience or discomfort caused by the repairs made by the landlord or the landlord's failure to provide any service or utility through the landlord's unit, or landlord's fault, excuse me. So I mean, the tenant is reading this. All this information is clearly outlined. They give them an opportunity from the time that they sign this lease. I think what needs to be proposed, I think some people do not understand what they're signing, do not know the responsibility of them as a tenant, as making it their home, and when they run into a problem, they want to just call people, the fire departments in different places, and then those things are brought to light, which is great, we can fix them. But the lease has already said you've broken it because you never put anything into writing to the tenant or to the landlord saying it was broke. So that's what I have this, you know, again, I thank you. The other thing, if I can say real quick, is I think that there should be an educational seminar for people looking to rent so they know what their responsibilities are, what the landlord's responsibilities are, because I think tenants don't really know what their responsibilities are.
Thank you, Michelle.
You're welcome.
Ron.
I'm Ron Irwin, and tonight I'd like to address the council in regards to the anti-retaliation ordinance. But first I gotta ask, do you hate all successful business people or just landlords? The ordinance was not provided to the general public on the city website until February 2nd, 2023, the day after you decide to have a first and second reading. It has been bragged that the room was packed with those in support of such an ordinance, which is odd considering the majority of the population and taxpayers had no clue a single word of that ordinance. So you guesstimate 2% of the population, you know. What this makes me wonder as to how you guys didn't put this out to the public, but yet you had public showing up in support of it. Nobody even knew, it was not on any agendas, nothing. Kind of curious as to how that happened, that certain people knew about it and not others. We have brought to you data and facts. We've asked questions on different things, and none of it was addressed. But yet, based on hearsay, nobody's brought a bit of data, just hearsay. And you guys wanted to rush through and push this ordinance through and everything without, you know, transparency. So I guess once again, I really do have to ask, do you hate all successful people, business people, or just landlords? I mean, what is the next group of people you're going to attack? For what business? Is it going to be bakeries, coffee shops? What's the next group of people or businesses that you're going to start attacking? I also would like to take and provide you with some examples of tenant retaliation. Now, this here is a nice glowing letter about how wonderful we were until the two roommates decided they didn't want to live with each other anymore. And then the one put on social media, landlord cleans the stairwell carpets for the first time in 9 months. I slowly drip spilled milk down them. Yes, the tenant dumped milk on the carpets after we scrubbed them because they didn't like the terms of that lease anymore because they went out. Now, I won't say the first hashtag after it, but then hashtag payback, hashtag I'll show you. Now, I have a whole stack of papers, and they're not all the same. These are pictures of how units have been sent back to us. And where's our protection? Where is our protection from tenants doing this? Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. Okay, notice of executive session meeting?
There are no notices at this time.
Approval of minutes, January 18th, 2023, regular meeting.
If I may, Madam Mayor, an executive session was held at 5:30 tonight in order to receive legal advice.
Approval of minutes, January 18th, 2023.
Motion.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call?
McKnight?
Aye.
Myers? Aye. Rohan?
Aye.
Vogel? Aye. Kinder?
Aye. Approval of minutes, February 1st, 2023, regular meeting minutes.
Motion.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call?
McKnight?
Aye.
Myers? Aye. Rohan?
Aye.
Vogel? Aye. Kinder?
Aye. Communication?
Council received a letter from Dornish Law Office regarding the residential rental licensing ordinance and the anti-retaliation ordinance.
Manager's report.
So Peter Grella, city planner, is here to go over the Planning and Zoning Commission's annual report for council. Copy of the report was provided to council in your packets. Also, just want to remind council to have any comments to me about the zoning ordinance by the end of day on February 22nd, so please. Go ahead, Peter.
Okay. Well, you have before you Maple Planning and Zoning Commission's annual report. The municipality's planning code requires that they submit an annual report to the governing body, to its council and management, by March 1st of every year, recording their activities of the previous year. The least that they can do is provide you a summary of it with attachment of the minutes. That's what you have before you now. If there's anything that you have questions about of the presentation, or in future years, any way that you would prefer to have the annual report delivered to you, or any content that you would wish to be included, please let me know.
Thank you, Peter.
Is that, sorry, that just seems like a question about can we ask questions about the content of the report?
Sure.
Is that okay? Where do things stand with the parking study? It seemed like in the fall that was an item for discussion, and I didn't see that beyond.
Right, it was. So I had gone out myself to count parking spaces, and the rate of parking in spaces on the street, in private lots, and on public lots that were accessible to me. However, as you know, part of the impetus was to investigate the usefulness of parking lots and the parking garage, because there is another study that we might have grant funding for, or that we're looking into for other downtown parking. That's on hold until we get news about the grant funded, if there will be a grant funded study or not.
Okay, further work on that study is on hold until we know.
Yes.
Got the grant funding. Do more. Thank you. Does anybody have any other questions?
I really appreciated reading the notes
Yeah.
and just the back and forth. I really thank you for doing. It was really useful for me.
Welcome, and compliments to Brenna for taking such detailed notes.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thanks, Peter. And thank you to the planning commission. All right, council subcommittee reports. There aren't any.
No, next week there'll be a meeting on the 22nd.
Yes.
At noon. This is typically reserved for subcommittee meetings, but all of council will be asked to attend because last week's meeting was canceled due to lack of quorum, just to go over priorities and assigning priorities to subcommittees.
But we did meet, like, kind of in the financial, we met with PA Municipal League, and that was really great, because I think in terms of the tax code, they have it, like, laid out, so there's really good possibilities there. So, moving ahead on that, that's like a really positive thing, kind of a subject.
Yeah, kind of. All right, old business. Ordinance, third and final reading, and retaliation ordinance.
I move to table.
Second.
Discussion?
I mean, if we're gonna vote, I at least want us to be transparent and clear with folks, right, what the conversation is. I don't think we should table. I think we should move forward with the folks who have come this week, last week, to move this forward. So I invite someone who wants
Well, in
to
light of
table
our-
to voice.
In light of
to the
our
public.
discussion earlier, it was brought to us that they would like to meet, landlords would like to meet, and there's maybe come to some type of solution where this doesn't have to go to court. And I think we should give them the opportunity to at least listen. Are we gonna come to an agreement? We don't know. We won't know until we sit down and talk. And that's what I feel we should do.
This would be reaching out attorney to attorney at this point.
It's my understanding that your motion, Jim, if you'd like to amend it or not, that the motion would be to table it until the March 1st meeting.
Correct.
Is that, what would you like to do, or do you want to put a deadline on the table?
I'd be happier to give you more time, but at least till March 1st, yes. I will amend the table till March 1st.
Any questions?
We need a second for that.
Yeah, Larry, do you agree to that?
Yeah, with the understanding that because it's, even moving on it now is not going to help resolve Connect 55 situation. So that will give us something, to go back. Yeah, I'll agree with that.
And if I could just put some meat on that vote on that comment, the optional charter third-class city law requires that there be at least 20 days prior to the effective date of an ordinance that is adopted. And so today, if it was adopted, you'd be 20-plus days out, which should, be well within the first couple weeks of March.
Right.
So the idea is for our attorney to meet with the firm that,
Dornish Law.
Dornish Law, who set or sent the letter, and negotiate and see if there is common ground on which the landlords can agree with everybody else on an equitable arrangement, if there is an equitable arrangement to be had for this kind of an ordinance.
And if not, we move on, move forward.
And I'd like to just point out that the reason why there was that push is our concern for the Connect 55 people, that's why we felt compelled, because we're very concerned their leases are coming up March 1st. It wasn't an underhanded, so just like as a piece of a puzzle that was, yeah, I know, but there's like.
Rules for the whole city.
But anyway, sorry, I shouldn't be interrupting, sorry, but, yeah.
Any other questions, council? Roll call.
McKnight?
Aye.
Myers?
Aye.
Roha?
Aye.
Vogel?
No.
Kinder?
No. New business? Discussion redevelopment plan priority?
Given that the redevelopment plan was identified as a priority of council, Peter is back again to present a memo that is included in your packets concerning the planning commission and the redevelopment authority's involvement in that redevelopment plan. Go ahead, Peter.
Okay, thank you. Among the planning commissions and redevelopment authorities' basic duties can be to identify redevelopment areas and develop plans in advance of attempts to redevelop them. With the exhaustion of the planning commission's role in shaping the new zoning ordinance, it's time they've had the ability to turn their attention to this. As far as I can tell on the shelf, we do not have a redevelopment area designated or a redevelopment plan in place to take advantage of for justifying funding or other opportunities to clear blighted properties or improve vacant areas in neighborhoods of need. Mostly, what I have written here in the memo that you see in your packet is pretty complete, unless you have any other questions that would complement your understanding of it.
I was just gonna kind of summarize that for everybody. So it takes that the planning commission will identify an area to be redeveloped, then the redevelopment authority is tasked with how to do that development in that area. This is obviously a directive from council to those two bodies, probably more specifically the redevelopment authority. What council's priorities are is that housing weatherization, as you had identified previously. So that's kind of what we're looking for a little bit tonight as well.
Yeah, I was just gonna share it with the rest of council that I had asked Peter some clarifying questions. Mainly, like for my own clarity, like originally I thought that what we were asking for in our priorities for the year was a housing plan. And so this is like a little bit of a shift, but you can correct me, it's my understanding that, right, a redevelopment plan can include like housing initiatives if that's part of the charge that we give. And so, yeah, and you all are looking for directive from council for planning commission and RDA to direct.
Correct. So just kind of to go with what Peter wrote in the memo about tasking the planning commission with coming up with a redevelopment area and then turning over and tasking the redevelopment authority with how that plan is to be developed.
So you're asking for a consensus?
Correct. So we can give the directive to those two.
Good.
I would support that.
I would support that with maybe the specification that the plan prioritize safe housing and improved housing conditions in whatever area, right? There's plenty of measures that are also blight remediation and other things.
In the end, council can have a veto vote over a redevelopment proposal that RDA presents. So in the end, if it doesn't meet your expectations, council can veto a proposal and it'll be sent to the drawing board back again in order to meet council's goals.
And
this will be a prolonged process.
And in order to kind of help not have that not happen, right?
Can we
is that
work together on it?
Peter's idea was to have, every month or every other month, the subcommittees and all of council look at the updates, get a report of how things are moving forward, and then council could possibly direct a little bit from there to try to prevent that absolute veto happening at the very end of month-long process.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, that'd be nice. Are we all moving towards this?
Yeah. Thank you for clarity.
And are folks good with those specified priorities of affordability and improved conditions, whether that's rehab, weatherization, etc.
Okay. Is that all you needed?
Yes, thank you.
Thanks, Peter.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks again, Peter. Okay, discussion revisions to Market House ordinance?
The current Market House ordinance dates back to 1914 and 1948. Obviously, because of this, one would imagine that many of the articles in here are outdated and no longer used by the market authority, and perhaps could be viewed as impeding the market authority's ability to do business. Included in your packet, you have a note from Paula Burley, the Market House Authority Chair, as well as an updated ordinance. This has gone through legal counsel review. Kirsten, Ames, market manager, as well as Paula were involved in kind of the updating of the ordinance. Does council have any questions on it? It's just for discussion this week. Next week it'll be up for first and second, next meeting it'll be up for first and second reading of council, so Jesus.
And just for point of clarification, the second floor is included in the Market House's lease.
Correct.
Which
Really,
seems
we're just-
like sensible.
Yeah, I
Very
was gonna say.
sensible updates.
Moving into 2023, right?
Yeah.
Well, I was here from 1914.
So you had there.
So, I mean,
It was hard to get that parchment into the scan.
I understand.
So if council has no objections, it will appear for first and second reading at the next meeting.
It's fine.
Great. All right, thank you.
I'm sorry, I don't have an objection. I have maybe a question. Section 93305. All revenues collected by the market manager for the use of the city will be turned over. What is that? Is that just because we handle the financial?
That's correct,
accounting?
yes.
Thanks.
Yep.
All right, resolution adopting updated civil service rules and regulations.
A resolution of the Council of the City of Meadville adopting amendments to the City of Meadville Civil Service Rules and Regulations.
So moved. Can I have a second?
Second?
Discussion?
As the resolution notates, this policy that you received via email as well as in printed version for some of you, went by review of the Civil Service Board. They adopted some edits to those to bring the civil service rules kind of up into how we do things currently. The biggest is going to be the police promotional testing, weights on that. So it was
40, 40, and
20.
20.
So this would have been oral boards, written score, and then based on your performance as a police officer. That's been brought up to date to a 30-30. 35-35-30 for those, giving a little bit extra weight to how you perform as a police officer, to try to make it a little bit more based on how the department is going to be moving forward in the future and how you've done in leadership roles and things like that, not just the paper score testing.
That's for promotions of
Only promotional.
officers on
Correct,
staff.
so from patrolman to sergeant.
There are a couple of minor edits. I talked with Tim earlier. And his advice was to pass it with the idea that we might need to amend. Specifically, they're on page 30 and 35. Two of them are typographical, but the other one deals with conflict of law, state and federal law. And he recommended that we get in touch with Bob Zaruda, who's our labor attorney. So I will voice my concerns.
If you would share those with me, Jim, I'll follow up with Bob. Bob did review and sign off on these
Yeah.
before they were presented to civil service, so I'll just circle back with him on that.
Sounds good.
Does anybody have any more questions? Roll call.
McKnight?
Aye.
Myers?
Aye.
Roja?
Aye.
Vogel?
Aye.
Kinder?
Aye. Resolution, appointing Diane Dedrick as city controller.
A resolution of the Council of the City of Meadville appointing Deputy City Controller Diana Dudrick as City Controller effective January 16, 2023.
So moved.
Second?
Discussion?
Rosemary Groves was the city controller. She was actually hired to fill the city's vacant payroll and HR position. She formally stepped down as city controller prior to taking that position. And Deputy City Controller Diana Diedrich has been filling in kind of in her absence. This motion would now make Diana the permanent city controller up until the next election, which is this year.
Anybody have any questions?
Is Diana on city staff?
She was in the treasurer's office. Has since retired, though.
Right now. Roll call.
McKnight?
Aye.
Myers? Aye. Roha?
Aye.
Vogel?
Aye.
Kinder?
Aye. Resolution ratify submission, FEMA Assistance to Firefighters Grant.
A resolution of the Council of the City of Meadville ratifying submission of an application for the Federal Emergency Management Agency's Assistance to Firefighters Grant Program.
Motion?
Second?
Discussion?
The city has submitted a FEMA Assistance to Firefighters grant in the amount of $88,500. This is for the purchase of an exhaust vent system for the fire station. The old vent system was installed when the facility was built in around 1999. And the system no longer functions to the capacity that it should. There are actually hookups that are not hooked up to anything and never have been since 1999. So this system would be imperative in removing the carcinogenic particles that are floating around with the fire truck. The city's portion of this grant would be $4,214.29 if we were awarded.
Does that mean the city, what we pay?
Correct.
Our contribution to the total project?
Could you tell more about, like, did they try to fix it and work with it and stuff? I was just curious. Or was it like, no, it's just,
I don't know the answer to that
Oh, you don't
question,
know?
to be
Okay.
honest with you.
How
I
long has it
imagine
been
so.
there?
Not since 1999.
Okay, so probably, they seem to be, they do
Yeah.
real well just to try to
When we were
fix
looking at
it.
the Quint, Pat Wiley took us around and was showing us,
Sure.
and he explained why the original system is not adequate.
And it sounds like not fixable, like it was, they were like,
Yeah.
it's not fixable. I was just curious, you know? Yeah.
And we trust them, right? Like,
What's the timeline, like when would we expect to hear back on the grant?
Do you know the timeline, Katie?
The grant was due at the end of last week. Typically, it's about a 4 to 6 week turnaround. We're hopeful that we will be successful. Erie, one of the fire departments in Erie, was able to use this grant to do the same thing, and it is a priority under the Assistance to Firefighters grant.
It's federal?
It is
Or
federal.
like nationwide? Yeah.
anybody have any other questions? Roll call?
McKnight?
Aye.
Myers?
Aye.
Roha?
Aye.
Vogel?
Aye.
Kinder?
Aye. Councilmember statements?
Jamie, I'm sorry, you have a non-agenda item comment section, is that correct, public comment?
Yeah, there is none.
Can I just intervene real quick? I apologize, but I just wonder, so you tabled this motion to meet with the landlord's lawyer? Are renters and tenants going to be able to have representation at this meeting too? Or is this just going to be a negotiating between the city's attorney and the landlord's attorney?
So I think that there'll be more information, right? Well, Tim, that's between those two attorneys, right? And
So they
then
get to
us.
have a special
So-
meeting? The landlords get to have their own meeting, is what you're saying?
No, it's lawyer to lawyer, it doesn't have anything to do with,
No, I mean,
Representative of the landlords.
no,
We're paying for it.
Who's representing
Uh,
the citizens?
okay. There's an ordinance that's on the table for third and final reading. There's a letter from a party saying they're going to sue if it's adopted in the manner in which it's in. City Council has made the decision to table that ordinance to allow me to have a conversation with them to see if there's middle ground on any of these provisions that may or may not be of concern, and then bring that back to City Council to decide whether they want to do anything about it.
I suppose the results of that meeting will be made available for public comment before a motion is carried.
There will be a report made back to City Council.
all right, we're gonna go to council member statements.
No, you have another, just one thing. The landlord group in general does not support the Connect 55. What has happened up there has been a travesty, and we know that. But I think it was city council that approved them to come in, not you folks, long before you folks were in there. But they approved them to come in and gave them tax breaks even on that. That company had problems even during the building. I had patients working in a 911 center, saw postings over there, that they weren't allowed to continue even to work because they were not paying their vendors. And of course, this company wanted to say it blamed it on COVID. It had very little to do with COVID. That didn't help the situation. But I believe city council allowed them to come in and allowed them tax breaks, not you folks, long before you folks.
Yeah, thank
And that
you.
was my mistake, and what's happened up there has been a travesty. You know, their rents are outrageous. But the rents in Meadville, I don't know if any of you go out of the country or out of the state.
Mr. Leary, I think we're gonna have, all right, yeah, we don't have.
Thank you. We
You
know
can say
that, thank
after I
you so
invite
much.
you, please.
Yeah, and, okay, council member statements. I think it's Jim,
I have nothing this evening.
okay. Gretchen?
I'm just not ready. Maybe Larry's ready.
Okay, Larry?
No, I don't have anything. Well, yeah. I just would like to say that, you know, I understand, you know, this dilemma that's going on with, and the misunderstanding. And I hope that both sides are open and minded enough to listen. We're not up here trying to take advantage. We're trying to come with a solution that everyone's happy. That's why our attorney is meeting with the attorney. You can scoff at it, but that's the only way you're going to get things done, is to meet and talk. Is everyone going to be happy? No. But we're going to do the best we can.
Thank you, Larry. Autumn?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we will suffocate if we hold our breath, waiting for a time when folks will be happy. Instead, I think we need to rise to the occasion and protect our tenants, again, 60%, over 60% of the city who rents their homes. I think, to the point that I heard you making, Mr. Leary, or Dr. Leary, actually, Brandon?
Jeff.
No? Okay, Jeff, all right. It was a very formal setting. The point I heard you making, Jeff, right, like, you know, we were really responding, I think, to a need we saw with this out-of-town landlord who was taking further retaliatory measures against folks who were organizing, and we were really trying to step up to protect some of those people, some of whom are in the room, right? And we want to be able to do that. It's disappointing to me that we haven't risen to that occasion today. I'm sorry that we didn't do that for you. But, right, those are the kinds of protections that we need to make across the board, just to make sure that folks who do come into our town to make a big development, and especially if a former council is gonna give them tax breaks, as you, I think, correctly pointed out, right? At least folks are protected and can stay there, and can organize for rents that they think are fair. Doesn't mean they have to be guaranteed those rents, right? Doesn't mean they have to be given the things they're asking for. It just means that if they are working together to try and ask for better conditions, or better treatment, that they don't get kicked out on those grounds, right? All we're trying to do, I look forward to this coming up next meeting, really hope that we can take some action then. I'm sorry we couldn't do it tonight.
Thanks, Autumn. I want to thank everybody for coming. This is an easy job, and I know people get upset, but I am, you know, really happy that people come and they tell us how they feel and they are able to speak to us. We do the best we can to protect people, and especially people that don't have those protections or need the help also, and make this community, right, like a place where everybody wants to live and everyone is content and able to find their joy. So again, I want to thank everybody for coming and putting their faith in us. So at that, I'm going to ask for a motion to adjourn.
To executive session?
To executive
discuss
session.
Personnel.
Yes, to discuss personnel.
Motion?
Second.
Discussion? Roll call.
McKnight?
Aye.
Myers?
Aye.
Rolla?
Aye.
Vogel?
Aye.